This lady is an op. This lady is an op. There's no way around it. In one breath, Stephanie White wants to finally come to grips in terms that the Indiana Fever is Caitlin Clark's team. Now, we all know she was forced and pressured into saying that. She had said multiple times, Kelsey Mitchell's the main priority here, yada, yada, yada. And we have in this article where Stephanie White blasts Caitlin Clark fans again, calling them toxic as if us.
This woman is operating with a clear agenda, and there's no denying it. Indiana Fever head coach Stephanie White has delivered her official take on the WNBA's new era, placing the blame exactly where the league prefers, on the fans. She's labeling Caitlin Clark supporters as toxic while conveniently overlooking the years of league-wide undermining and player-driven hostility that shaped this environment in the first place. We're breaking down the full scale of this misdirection and exposing the key details she chose to ignore. So the question is Stephanie White truly worried about toxicity, or is she simply defending the WNBA's establishment?
Us toxic for saying the obvious about the sabotage that was going in this league and how this woman has been targeted since before she even stepped foot in it, all while Stephanie White wants to ignore the facts of what the other players in this league have done. From disrespecting fans, starting fake racial investigations, going on platform. I'm going to give you the facts that Stephanie White.
We need to address Stephanie White because she has now completely revealed her true stance. This isn't about coaching anymore. This is about picking a side in a culture war that WNBA players and officials created long before they were willing to admit that Caitlin Clark was the real force behind their sudden surge in relevance.
On Sue Bird's podcast, where she kind of spoke about the toxicity around the league and things that needs to change. Let's get into it. Here it says, Indiana Fever coach Stephanie White shared a strong message about negativity surrounding the WNBA. Here it says, the WNBA experiencing a massive growth period over the past couple of years is an undoubtedly good thing. In fact, there's a case to be made that it could not have come at a better time for the league, given that the Players Association is currently in negotiations with the WNBA league office for the next collective bargaining agreement. And we see
in one moment, White finally acknowledged the undeniable truth that the Indiana Fever now belongs to Caitlin Clark. And let's be honest, she didn't say that willingly. She said it because she had no choice. For the longest time, White tried to push the idea that Kelsey Mitchell was the true franchise centerpiece, the main priority, the player they were supposedly building around. She kept that narrative alive even after Clark was drafted and the entire landscape of the league shifted. Over and over, White insisted that Mitchell was the top priority, the one who deserved to navigate this phase of her Indiana Fever journey. You saw the statements. You saw how heavily she leaned into presenting Mitchell as the focal point of the offseason.
And building a relationship with Kelsey, who I also covered when she was playing in college, who's somebody that was really instrumental in everything that we did.
It all felt like a subtle, calculated effort to downplay Caitlin Clark's obvious impact. But eventually, the tidal wave of Clark mania grew too large for White to ignore, forcing her to pay lip service to the truth. Now, she's back to her usual antics, using the biggest platform she could find, Sue Bird's Bird's Eye View podcast, to attack Clark's fan base, calling them toxic. As a Clark fan, let me be clear, she is my favorite basketball player to watch. Male or female, I have to call this out as deliberate misdirection. White is labeling fans toxic simply for pointing out the sustained, coordinated sabotage Clark faced long before she officially entered the professional league. While pointing fingers at fans, White ignores the very public, well-documented actions of other players and league personnel. This isn't about uncontrolled fan behavior on social media. It's about the league and its players fueling the very toxicity they now condemn. The evidence White conveniently omitted is clear. From the beginning of the CBA and popularity saga, players like Angel Reese were already talking about rival leagues like unrivaled before the season even started, planting an us versus them mentality. That tension persisted all season, with players like Satu Sabali calling out the WNBA over financial issues and wearing "Pay us what you owe us" shirts during the All-Star break. This institutional chaos has unfolded due to player grievances, not fan tweets. Yet White tries to shift the blame entirely onto the fans.
Basketball hadn't experienced this boom in popularity, which is largely in part to star players like Caitlin Clark, Angel Reese, and Paige Beckers. I don't know why they keep trying to throw them in it. I get Angel Reese did bring some popularity. Paige Beckers did too, but they don't need to be a part of the Caitlin Clark conversation. Caitlin Clark is the reason for the boom in the WNBA, point blank, period. It's not because of no Angel Reese. It's not because of no Paige Beckers. They were some of the lowest. They had some of the lowest attendance for their games throughout the entire season. So I don't know why they keep trying to lump them in with Caitlin Clark. But whatever. It's hard to imagine the WNBA players would get vastly increased salaries they're going to receive as part of a ratified CBA, or at least their salaries wouldn't have increased to the same degree. Now, we know they wouldn't be asking for all this money if it wasn't for Caitlin Clark.
White and others keep trying to group Caitlin Clark with Angel Reese and Paige Beckers when talking about the recent surge in WNBA popularity, as if to dilute Clark's impact by saying the boom comes from multiple stars. Let's be real. Reese and Beckers are talented, no question, but the true reason for the league's explosion in attention is Caitlin Clark, plain and simple. It isn't because of Reese, it isn't because of Beckers. Even after their college success, those players drew some of the lowest attendance numbers all season, while Clark was consistently selling out arenas. Minimizing her massive individual impact by lumping her in with others is a deliberate attempt to obscure the truth, spreading credit so thin that the establishment can avoid admitting what's obvious. One player reshaped the league's financial landscape. The article White referenced makes it clear, without this boom, the Clark boom, WNBA players wouldn't be demanding the higher salaries outlined in the new CBA. They wouldn't even be in a position to ask for that kind of money if Clark hadn't opened the door. Yet instead of celebrating her as a financial game changer, White chooses to focus on the downside, toxicity. On Sue Bird's podcast, she said she wants to address toxicity in the league, while also admitting it's not something she can fully control. This is a classic, condescending move, placing the blame on the fans while letting the highly paid professionals off the hook. Let's address the behavior Stephanie White is choosing to ignore. The actions of players who started the nastiness that fans are merely reacting to. For example, we saw players like Enrique Iawali using national platforms like ESPN during Clark's first professional season to call out fans, essentially saying, "We don't want you." That's a player actively pushing away the new audience. Is that fan toxicity, or is it player toxicity? Then there was Ryan Howard, who went to the post-game podium and publicly disrespected fans cheering for AJ Wilson at an Atlanta Dream home game, upset that supporters were applauding an opposing player. So let's be clear, hardworking fans spending their own money to attend a game aren't allowed to cheer for who they want. Is cheering for a star on the road really toxic? And in the same vein, Kaya Copper of the Phoenix Mercury complained when fans booed Dana Bonner, who had left the Indiana Fever and was returning to Indianapolis as an opposing player. Clearly, much of the so-called toxicity comes from the players themselves, not the fans. So fans aren't allowed to cheer for an opposing star, nor boo a player who left their team. What exactly are they supposed to do, Stephanie? Fans, including black supporters of Clark, have been subjected to disgusting, racist insults from other players and commentators. Yet White and the league's establishment never call out the actions of those players that fueled the negativity. They only talk about toxicity when it fits their narrative. It took Nfisa Collier's injury and missing the playoffs for the media and coaches to finally address the dirty, overly physical, and often dangerous play Clark endured all season. She was by far the most flagrantly fouled player in the league, with the actions coming from other players and referees allowing it to continue. This was not caused by fans. Even the Indiana Fever organization contributed to the toxic environment, hiding and misrepresenting Clark's injury status for months while continuing to use her to sell tickets, repeatedly calling her game-to-game or day-to-day despite conflicting reports from journalists. Conflicting insider reports about Clark's health only added to the confusion, and surely an organization misleading its brand new fan base plays a role in creating a toxic atmosphere. Yet White chooses to blame fans for toxicity. even though they are the ones finally holding the league and its players accountable. Fans are simply calling things as they see them. When a player deliberately fouls Clark in the head, and neither the commentary team nor the coach addresses it, fans speak up. When players act jealous or disrespectful, fans notice and call it out. This isn't toxicity, it's accountability. If Stephanie White truly wants to address toxicity, she needs to do so across the board. Call out players who publicly disrespected the fans funding their salaries. Call out those who initiated fake racial investigations to distract from real basketball issues. And call out the repeated, targeted physical fouls Clark endured throughout the season. Call out the players who targeted the league's biggest star. Call out the organizations that misled the public about injury reports. Call out everything. Don't just shift blame on fans who are simply pointing out the obvious, visible sabotage. This is why I see Stephanie White as acting like an operative for the WNBA establishment, scapegoating fans to protect the league and its players. During the preseason, she heavily promoted Kelsey Mitchell as the #1 priority, only to be forced to backtrack. Now she's trying to regain favor with the old guard by attacking the very audience that genuinely supports her team's most valuable asset. In doing so, she shields the old WNBA culture of gatekeeping and entitlement, while ignoring the undeniable truth about who is responsible for most of the league's drama. If the discussion is about meaningful change, focus on structural issues, like White did correctly by advocating for a longer season, giving these women the chance to have basketball as their primary career and to compete fully alongside the overseas calendar. That is a legitimate and important point about player welfare. But when a valid structural argument is combined with a politically motivated attack on your own team's fan base, the credibility of the message is completely undermined. White damages her own credibility by showing she's more focused on protecting the established narrative than actually solving the problems in the league. Her position is completely contradictory. She can publicly admit that Clark is the team's top priority because of the revenue she brings in, and then immediately criticize the very fans who made her that priority. This demonstrates a fundamental lack of understanding of her role and amounts to public relations self-sabotage, designed to appease the small, bitter circle of WNBA traditionalists at the expense of the millions of new, passionate fans. This is exactly why I believe Stephanie White should be removed from her position. She has shown a clear inability to manage the league's biggest star and a deliberate disregard for the true sources of the league's negativity. What she calls toxicity is actually the collective voice of a large, engaged fan base saying, "We see what's happening, and we won't accept it." That isn't toxicity, it's accountability, Stephanie. Stephanie White attempted to gaslight the WNBA's largest fan base, labeling them as toxic while shielding the players and league from any responsibility. The reality is clear. Fans are simply responding to years of sabotage and disrespect that the league allowed to happen. You can't blame the thermometer for the fever. Her lack of transparency is a serious problem. Drop your thoughts in the comments and tell me if you think White went too far with her remarks. Don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe to stay updated, and ring the notification bell.